This is the second video in our Lunch and Learn for complex Excel formulas. In this video, we're going to talk about two different formulas, a Countif's formula and an indirect formula. We're going to start off with the Countif's formula, and in this example, I'm using it for a bin spreadsheet. So for this bin spreadsheet, how we've typically done this is creating a new bin spreadsheet each time we have a different weather file. The Countif's formula allows us to be able to use the same format for our template for any weather data that we have. And how this works is using a Countif's formula. The Countif's formula counts the number of occurrences something happens on more than one variable. And so in this case, we're looking at the variables being outside air temperature and time of day. So in this weather data tab, I've got all of my annual data as it's exported from eQuest, having month, day, hour, type, and outside dry bulb. And on my baseline, I'm using the Countif's formula to look at that data, and it's doing two different count formulas. So it's counting if the weather data in column E, which is outside dry bulb temperature, is equal to the outside air temperature in this bin spreadsheet. And you'll see that I locked the letter so that this formula can be dragged down but not over as far as the reference. So this 120 will stay the same as I drag over to the right, but it will drag down to the different outside air temperatures in the bin formula as I drag this formula down. The other piece that I'm looking at is in the weather data C column, which is the hour, and making sure the hour matches the hour that we have listed in the, for this reference, column B. And again, I'm locking the numerical reference here so that this can be drug over but not down. And so as you can see, if we go to the center here, we're still referencing the hour 9 and the outside air temperature of 109. And for this particular weather file, we aren't getting any hourly totals until we get to 108 degrees. And if we go down to the bottom, we see that we have 8,760 hours total, which is divided 365 hours per hour bin. Why this is useful is because now we can change the weather data in this weather data tab to both different weather files, as well as we can change it to data that maybe is not a complete year. So over here is the same weather data, but I've gone through and taken months out of the summer to simulate if we're doing a K through 12 school that doesn't have summertime operation. So what we can do is we can delete all this information out of here, copy this information over, and paste it in to the cells that are referenced. And as you can see here, now this 109 degree temperature is no longer there because it occurred in the summer months. So now our hottest temperature for the non-summer months is actually 93. And if we go down to the bottom, we should no longer have 8,760 hours referenced. There we go, now it's updated. So as you can see, now we've got 7,033 hours because we've taken out those summer months. So the next formula I'm going to talk about is the indirect function. So this was using the same logic as far as trying to create a bin spreadsheet using different weather data where the client wanted to have the weather files embedded in the document. So what I did was I created a data validation looking at a list that has different weather files, and as you can see, the names of this weather data correspond to the yellow weather files, or the yellow worksheets down here at the bottom. You need to make sure that these have the exact same name as the worksheet, because the indirect formula will be allowing a formula to reference a worksheet. So what was done here was we had to create an indirect reference table. The A3 is looking at the building data input B2. So as you change this reference point, our indirect reference changes. And this formula here is saying A3, so return the Indianapolis format for the worksheet. And then in quotations and bracketed, we have all and outside air temperature in the B column and all and hour in the C column. And what that's referencing is it's referencing this table on the sheet. All is referencing the entire table. And then the second part of this indirect after the comma, OAT, is only referencing the table column that is labeled OAT. So if you put this into a table and you have that table have headers, you can reference that header in the table and it will select all the data that's in that column. So I've got my indirect references here, one for the outside air temperature that's looking at the table on the Indianapolis worksheet at the outside air temperature, and then the same but for the hours. When going to my baseline, it's the same thing here that I was doing in the previous Countifs formula, except for instead of counting if and just inputting the data as in references to one spreadsheet, this is using the indirect formula to pick whatever worksheet is referenced as this indirect reference formula. So it's saying Countifs indirect reference B3. So this one here, which is referencing the Indianapolis worksheet, the table, and only the outside air temperature column. And it's counting if that matches the outside air temperature in the bin spreadsheet. And then the second part of the Countifs formula has to reference the hour. It's doing the same thing. It's referencing the indirect reference on C3, which is the hours, again, looking at the table and just the hours column, and making sure that that reference matches the hour in the table. And just as we did with the Countifs, we drag it all the way down, making sure we're locking the appropriate cell. So in this one, we're locking the letter, and this one we're locking the number, and allowing it to drag down. And now what this will do is it'll allow it to create this bin spreadsheet based on whatever indirect reference worksheet is being referenced. So for instance, if we're looking at the Indianapolis and we see our outside air temperature, the maximum outside air temperature is 97. If we were to change this to a different weather file, like Boston, now we see that the actual maximum temperature is 99, and we can go to our Boston worksheet, unprotect it, look at the max for the outside air temperature, and it should be, and is, the same value as what we're seeing in the baseline. And so this is how you can use an indirect formula. There are other ways and other reasons to use the indirect formula. It's usually referencing either named tables. So for instance here, we don't have a named table. We could name this table and I'll use the indirect reference to reference that named table, or referencing a worksheet. And you can, on that worksheet you could reference a specific cell, or you could reference a specific table like we did with the all function here. So this is how I use Countifs and the indirect formula for this project. If you do find other uses for indirect, please share them with the rest of the employees, and maybe this formula can be incorporated into the way you set up Excel spreadsheets. Thanks.